Hi guys, so I am joined today by the wonderful Sara Haadem. So I'll let Sara talk to you about what she does for a living and how she contributes to well-being. But I'm delighted to have her on the show with us today. Sara, thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
It's really nice to have you here. And I'm going to start with a really simple one because I think it's important before we start talking about the topic of well-being to understand your perception around the definition of well-being. What is well-being, particularly when you talk about it in a sales environment, when you think about sales professionals? And what does it mean and why is it important?
I think especially within sales, it's such a tough industry and there's so much pressure on you within the role. So I think taking care of yourself is highly essential, because if you don't, then you're essentially going to crash and burn. So I think in the end, you were put here on this earth and it's your responsibility to make sure that you're going to last as well. So that's why it's so essential to take care of yourself.
Absolutely. Thank you for that. It's a really, really good start. So Sara, tell us about your background. What is it that you do? Where have you come from that has led you to a world of sales and well-being and the combination between those two things?
So I have a background in psychology and actually criminology. Originally, I was so interested in what makes a person a criminal, actually. So that's why I chose to study that. But it quickly became apparent to me that I was more interested in the psychological aspect and what makes people tick. And I think that's why I've always been so interested in sales as well, because that's such a huge part of it as well. Understanding people, see what they need, and try to fit that need. So I actually started a role at a tech company, and they were looking for someone that knew the Scandinavian languages. So I'm originally from Sweden. So I was like, oh, this fits perfectly. So that's kind of where I ended up there. But I realized quite quickly that this market, they didn't put a lot of work on well-being because it was such a tough industry. It was often emphasized that you need to work hard and it's a tough environment, but they rarely talked anything about how we as a company are going to help you through this difficult process. So I think that's what led me to sales, especially in the tech industry, from just being there previously and seeing that there was a lack of interest in the wellness industry, and just that they need to take care of their employees a lot better to make sure that not only their employees thrive, but also the company. So I think that's where my interest started.
Really interesting that you went from crime to sales. So there's a good starting point for the conversation.
So different from each other.
I'm sure there are some comparisons there anyway. But you mentioned there about sales and a lack of focus on well-being. Do you think that's particularly strong in the sales industry over perhaps another industry? Do you think it is something that we fall behind on as an industry?
I think a lot of industries, they need to focus on it a lot more than what they actually do. And it's crazy because I reached out to so many different companies and the response I got back is, oh, this is not a priority right now, which is quite baffling for me. So it's not only something I've seen in the sales industry, it's across other industries as well. But I think it's needed, especially in the sales industry, because of the high pressure that it brings.
It's interesting to hear an organization say out loud, our employees' well-being isn't high up on our priority list effectively. And I mean, there's always going to be an element of that being a fob off, I don't want to talk to you, but if that's an authentic objection coming from a real place, then it's concerning, right? That companies see well-being as being such a low priority.
Yeah, it's crazy. I cannot believe that is the world we currently live in, but hopefully I will be the first step to make that difference and raise awareness for mental health and how truly important it is.
Brilliant. Well, that leads me perfectly into my next question. So tell us a little bit about what you do in your work and how you work within your coaching to help organizations and individuals.
So what I do is that I help individual people and I help them get to where they need to be. So essentially, how life coaching works is that it's a person-centered approach. So the client is the expert of their own lives. They know what suits them best and how they operate. But sometimes we can get a little bit lost in the process. So this is where I come in and I help to guide them and get them to where they need to go. And I do this in a very creative, light, and fun way because people have this perception that, you know, when you go and talk to someone, it needs to be very dark and this is going to be a sad part. But I see it the complete opposite. I'm like, this is an exciting process. We're getting to know who you are, how you operate. Like, this is great. After have been so lost your entire life, you're finally going to find out who you are. So that's why I see it as a fun process and creative as well, because sometimes people tend to get stuck in a bit of a track because it's like they go into a hamster wheel. They keep on thinking and thinking about the same scenario over and over again. So what I tend to do here is I lift people out of that scenario by having different exercises. So sometimes I get my clients to draw out the scenario that they're currently in, and that kind of gets them out of their head and allows them to be those observers. So in that sense, it's a bit creative as well in what I do.
That's really interesting. So within the sales industry, obviously you talk about people getting stuck. What are some of the things that people get stuck with that you see most often?
So I think there's three main examples that I can come to think of. So the first one is the competitive environment. So it's the competition amongst colleagues that I see quite often, and people find it quite frustrating because they can't really be vulnerable with their colleagues about what's going on. And I think that is such a shame because it is such a tough and difficult industry. And I think you really need to have the opportunity to be vulnerable in that scenario as well, to hold each other up when times get difficult. So I think competition is something that people really struggle with because it's a bit of a square environment where people work as machines, you know? And I think even research has shown that this is really unhelpful for the company as a whole, because if you can't be vulnerable and helping your colleagues, then the foundation of the entire company is going to come down. It's important that we take care of each other, you know, especially within sales. That is such a tough industry. So I would say that's one of the first things that I tend to see. And then we also have the trouble of switching off due to the accessibility to technology nowadays. So I think I saw this at my work and the clients I've been talking to as well, that they have such a hard time switching off because they usually have their emails connected to their personal phones as well. So, you know, before they go to bed, they have notifications popping up, and before they go to sleep, that's the last thing they come to think of. So I think that's one of the issues I tend to see as well. And I think the last one is just receiving very high complex tasks that needs to be done within a short period of time, as well as having this happen over a long period of time, because I can see from a leadership perspective that they need to outdo their competitors and they need to be quick, especially within technology, within sales, that they need to stay ahead of the game. But I think that's where it's important to think more about the long term rather than the short term for their employees, and giving them a bit of rest and making sure that they can restore their energy if they've had events or they're crammed with a certain deadline. So I think that's the three issues that I've been seeing.
Yeah, that's really interesting. And we hear about those challenges a lot. You specifically, as I understand it, work with SDRs and BDRs
Exactly.
in the software space. Why did you choose that particular field? What was it for you that pointed you in that direction?
So for me, it was because I used to work as an SDR myself. And within that industry, I just saw that it's really tough because essentially SDRs, they're the ones that kick down the door to get the first initial contact with the companies that they're trying to target. So it's very tough because obviously when you talk to people, they're not going to be open to hear what you have to say, and we have to deal with rejection on a daily basis. And I think that's essentially what drew me there, just that it is a very tough job to do. And I think because of the environment and the nurture of that job, that it's so important to focus more on mental health and teaching your employees how to deal with the stress and the pressure.
Mm. You talked about the challenges such as people checking their emails before they go to bed, and they go to bed thinking about work. And as an SDR or a BDR, that's a dangerous game. But of course, we've all been there and done that, and probably continue to in most of our audience cases. How much of the responsibility around that behavior and changing that behavior falls on the individual person? Because your company can't be there all the time to check on you and create the right behaviors, versus falling on the organization to try and create the right mindset and the right balance for people.
I think essentially that comes down to the individual, and I think that's important, where I think that's an essential part where you need to put yourself first in order to make sure that you will thrive. You have to put yourself first in this scenario. And I know sometimes, especially a lot of SDRs, they're quite young and they've just come out of university, so they want to prove themselves and just what they're capable of. So I think a lot of them try to keep up the entire time, but I think this just ends up being detrimental for their health. So I think definitely the responsibility there falls on the individual. And then, of course, there are other things that the company can do to help them out. But I think also the company, it would be a good thing if they can inform them about this as well, and say, like, look, some people have their email connected to the private phone. We would not recommend for you to do this because your brain needs to rest as well. It cannot be involved in work the entire time.
Yeah, that's really interesting, because it shows that we are all there. You know, we're responsible for looking after ourselves, and of course, if we don't, then how would we expect somebody else to do that? So it's interesting to hear you say that. But naturally, the company can contribute and should be contributing from I guess from an educational perspective, by the sounds of things.
Yeah, definitely, especially because of the environment that they're in. I think I remember during my interview, it was a lot of emphasis on that it's a tough environment, but less on this is how we're going to educate you to make sure that you can hack it. And there again, it's a debate. How much is it the company's responsibility and how much is it the employee's responsibility? But I think it depends on the scenario.
So what would you say to a budding SDR, a couple of years in, doing really well, who says, no, that's my edge. You know, the fact that I'm up late, I work long hours, I'm committed. There's an expectation in the industry that he or she who works the longest hours is the most committed and gets the next promotion. What would you say to somebody who has that mindset and thinks that they have to do that to get forward in their career?
I think I would dig deep and see how useful this is for them. And then, as well as, I don't really think that it's viable in the end. You might be able to last for about 6 months doing that, but in the end, you're not going to be able to last 3 or 4 years before burning out. And that is the harsh reality. But I think essentially, just because I never want to put my words into their mouth, I want them to come to that realization themselves. So I would ask them questions such as, okay, so how does this affect you? How is your performance? How is your mood? And I would dig deep to see if this is actually useful for them or not.
And what do you see in your experience of people that do continue to sustain that kind of working mentality and lifestyle? Because you talk about 6 months, for an example there. What happens at that point where you hit the point of no return? It is too hard, it's too much, I've done it for too long. In your experience, what are the types of things that happen at that point?
I think at that point, either people burn out or they have to leave their position because it gets too hard. And this is why I continue to emphasize how important it is to take care of yourself, especially within this industry.
Interesting. So let's talk about the importance of mental health within the workplace. Obviously, you're talking to people who no doubt are battling about that. And I think it's important to define that mental health can be, I'm feeling a little bit anxious, a little bit tired, I'm a little bit burnt out, through to, medical mental health challenges that might impact your everyday. How important a part does that play in an SDR or BDR's career?
I think it's so important, because if you don't, you will crash and burn. And this is how I see it. The employees, they are the pillar of the company. They are the foundation. If that is not nurtured, the company will crash and burn. And this is why it's so essential, because if you nurture those pillars, if you build a strong foundation, then the company will naturally thrive. I feel like one cannot really exist without the other.
Yeah, interesting. And in your opinion or experience, how much connection is there between mental health and physical health, physical fitness, which of course plays a part in somebody's overarching well-being?
Yeah, no, it's tremendous. It's because with fitness, we're able to release endorphins, and it makes us, we can handle stress so much better as well. So I think it's not only making sure that you take care of yourself, it's what you eat, it's who you surround yourself with. There are a lot of different things that that plays a part in mental health, but I think what's important to remember is that everyone is so different. So it's important for us to find out what works for you.
Yeah, that's really interesting. What about the challenges around mental health? So one of the challenges we see is starting the discussion around mental health, getting people to acknowledge it and just normalizing that discussion. Working with SDRs and BDRs, and as many as you do, you must see some other challenges around that topic of conversation that are barriers towards people getting that right within their life.
So do you mean trouble with discussion within the company or within themselves?
I think both. The things that stop us being able to address that as an issue within the workplace will no doubt come from the organization and its culture, and also the individual and the working environment and their perception of the topic, I suppose.
Yeah, I think, again, it has a lot to do with the individual, but I think if you have a more open environment within the company and say, like, look, mental health is a huge thing for us. We want it to be an open policy, whatever it is. I think that generates an environment where people will feel more comfortable to be vulnerable. So I think it's allowing that vulnerability and having an open door and telling your employees, like, look, it's okay if you're having a bad day. It's okay if you're struggling. Coming to us, we'll make sure that we can solve it somehow. We'll collaborate. This is a partnership. We're going to figure this out together to make sure that people don't feel alone.
Interesting. Sarah, who should have a coach? So if we took a broad range of SDRs and BDRs across the sectors that you work in, who should have a coach? Should they all have a coach? Is it something that's particularly useful at particular times or certain scenarios?
I think, of course, if you feel that you're struggling and something is not right, something is off, then definitely I would recommend hiring a coach. But essentially, I feel like it's never a bad thing to get to know yourself better and knowing who you are. I think whether you're struggling or not, but of course, if you're really struggling, then I would say that it's really essential that you get the help that you need. But, for other people as well, just that needs to figure themselves out a little bit better.
Okay, and what does coaching look like? So let's say I'm an SDR, I've identified that I've got some challenges, maybe I'm feeling a little bit stressed out at work, or things are getting on top of me and I'm turning to some external support, and I see coaching as an option. How would you describe the process and what I'm likely to get out of it, and I guess the benefits of going through that process with you?
Well, I think it completely depends on what the challenges are, because, as I said before, one person is so different from the other. And it's not really to say like this is exactly what's going to happen, because what happens in this scenario for this person is not going to happen the same way that it does for another individual, because individuals are so complex. They're not, it's not that you can divide people into different categories, like this is type A and this is type B and this is how everyone works, because people are more complex than that. But what I tend to do is just explore what do they actually want to accomplish, because there are so many times where I've had clients that comes to me and say like, look, I want to work with this, but as we go further into the coaching process, a lot more comes up and it's like, okay, no, this is actually what I want to work on. So I think it's essentially that, figuring out what they really want, where they're currently at, what have they tried, what haven't they tried, and then exploring truly what the challenge is, taking it from there. And I mean, if you're struggling with your life, the outcome will be that your life will be so much better and you will be happier, healthier, more grounded. So why wouldn't you do it?
And as an organization hiring SDRs, bringing SDRs into the business, and I've got a team of SDRs and I'm working them hard and all that sort of stuff. What are some of the great examples you see? Because I guess you work with people and hear stories of organizations that are absolutely the pinnacle in terms of setting the right example and opening the conversation on mental health and physical well-being, and really setting that bar high. And then there are others who, as we touched on before, it's not a priority for us right now, thanks very much, and aren't aware or conscious of it or aren't bothered by it. Have you got some examples of some of the things that the great organizations are doing and that you see on your travels that where companies are setting the bar high for us?
Well, I think what I've seen so far is that companies are definitely putting a lot more emphasis on having team nights out and bonding activities. I think that's really essential for the team, because that is what is going to bring people closer, and that's what's going to bring down the barriers that the competition has brought out from the beginning. So I think team building exercises is something that I've seen and that I highly recommend. And by team bonding exercises, I don't mean like going on a night out drinking, because that's not going to help anyone. You need to do something that's going to bring people together. And so that's what I've seen so far, that I think it's great that people are starting to move in that direction.
It's interesting you say that, because I certainly feel like the typical view of well-being and creating a community at work and that sort of stuff is, well, we give them fruit, we pay, they have a night out and they drink together, which of course in some people's cases is exacerbating the problem rather than helping it.
Exactly.
So what are the schemes and the things that organizations are doing so that togetherness through team tasks or team events or team experiences that isn't always drinking? And getting out of that culture. What about within the workplace on the normal day-to-day? I guess a lot of it is built into the foundations of who you are as an organization, as a culture, right?
Definitely. I think what I actually saw at my last company that was really good, we had a team target and we try to incorporate this with nutrition, so within movement. So you had to, run a specific mile or something, and that would up the team target and we would get an overall reward. So I think just working within the team and making sure that activities are built bring people more together, I think that is essentially the way to go. And if you can bring that into fitness, that's even better. Actually, now when I come to think of it, they also had a thing where we were cycling to Brighton during one of the weekends. I did not participate in that because I'm not much of a biker, but I like the idea of it, and I think that's what matters.
That's right. Well, you remember it and you're talking about it still, so it had an impact on you even though you didn't partake in it directly. So that's really interesting to see that you brought that up. And I wonder if you could give us maybe a success story. Give us an example of somebody that you've worked with. Obviously you can't give personal details and confidential information, but an example of the type of situation that you've worked with and the difficulties they've had at that time and what you've been able to get them to in terms of the next stage in their career or turning that situation round. Maybe you could give us a sort of a non-personal story of something like that.
Yeah, so what I tend to see is that people's stress levels are very high. So it's lack of sleep and shortage of breath, and their heart beats very fast, and they have such a difficult time unwinding. So let's say it's you finished off the work week, but on Friday night, you're so wound up by work, and Saturday, you're so wound up by work. So on Sunday, that is the day when you can actually calm down and unwind. But then on Monday, you have to go to work again. So it's the same kind of wheel. So I've seen that is like one of the main issues that I see. So with that, I tend to help people and remove themselves from the situation where they can become more of the observer rather than being in it. So when they feel that their stress levels are coming up, they can kind of take a step back from the situation and just sit, explore, and observe, and just like let things pass without letting it affect them the same way. And I think that has made a huge difference in people's lives where they just deal with stress a completely different way, and they're happier and healthier. And I know in their personal relationships as well, some of them were falling apart, and now all of a sudden they're flourishing and they're better than they ever have been before, you know? So it's just great being able to make that difference.
That was really useful, hearing some of those, I guess, those vital signs to look for as a BDR, as an SDR, anybody in sales really that's working, or indeed anybody anywhere who's working under pressure in a stressful environment, is that part of the challenge is identifying what that feeling is, isn't it? And being able to know it. So you talked there about sort of shortness of breath, increased heart rate, a level of anxiety, not being able to sleep, I guess, is one of them. What other signs should people be looking for to identify it as stress or anxiety or pressure at work?
I think truly listen to your body, what your body is telling you. Do not ignore it, because all of a sudden you wake up one day and you cannot get out of bed. And I hear so many people that reflect on their journey before they got there, and they're like, you know what, there were so many signs. It was the constant headaches, having difficulty with bright light, being easily irritated, lack of sleep. So there were always signs. So I think it's always really, really important to listen to what your body is telling you, because if you can feel that something is not right in your body, it's probably not. So I'm encouraging you to pay attention to it.
And how important is this topic right now? We're recording this in the middle of the COVID-19 or coronavirus pandemic, a new working environment for people where we're isolated, we're less connected with people. We're working from home for the first time for a lot of people, particularly at SDR and BDR level, who maybe wouldn't have been trusted to do that in a normal environment. How does that change this topic, and how important is this topic right now with the change of environment for people?
I think it's more important than ever, because, I mean, we're used to getting stimulated on a daily basis, just going to work, seeing different things, and being in the same environment that could be really harmful to our health. So, I mean, there's different ways for you that I would recommend that people can tackle this and make it their situation a little bit easier for them, that will increase their energy levels and just make people more happier.
Okay, Sarah, so give us your top five health tips for people, SDRs, BDRs, working from home in amongst this environment where we've got lots of stress and lots of pressure and difficulty for everybody. What are your top 5 health tips for right now?
So my top health tips would be start the day off with a cold shower. Now, hey. I know. Yeah, see, I know that face. I told my flatmate about this as well. She's like, yeah, I'm gonna think about that one, you know. I'm not really gonna go for that one. But then the other day she came to me, she's like, you know what? I actually tried it. It was so good. I feel like a new human being, you know, I'm energized, I'm ready to go. I'm like, I mean, I didn't want to be the one that said I told you so, but
but you said I told you so.
Maybe.
So how long should somebody go in a cold shower for? Is it a 10-second blast? Is it a 2-minute cold shower? Is it cold shower after a hot shower, or is it just cold shower?
So I mean, I haven't really gotten to that point yet where I go cold shower full out. I'm not that brave yet. I'm getting there. I'm getting there. So first it's hot shower and then it's cold shower, and I usually do it like 15-20 seconds. When you start to feel your heart rate going down and you start to feel revitalized, I say that's the time to step out. And it's originally stems from this guy named Wim Hof. So if you haven't heard about him, I would say that you should research him, research about his theory about taking cold showers. It's really good and has amazing health benefits to it. So I would say that's the first one. And the other one is get your sleep. That has such a huge impact on our well-being. So make sure to get your hours in. And then, as we touched upon a bit before, is also the nutrition. So if you want to feel good, then you better eat good. And I know, especially during these times, it's so easy to go to that cupboard, grab the snacks, grab the chocolate. Not gonna lie, I have been one of those people. But then I actually started changing my diet, and I feel so much better now. You know, I'm just more energized, and you can just feel the whole body just feels so much better. So that's the third one. Fourth one is movement. My dear old father, he always used to tell me, if you're ever feeling low or anxious, you go for a walk. If that doesn't work, you go for another one. And then essentially it will help because it helps to release all the endorphins, and it helps with stress as well. So when I say movement, honestly, it doesn't have to be that you have to run for an hour. Just 20-minute walk, that's enough to make sure that you get out, get a different environment. And then I would say that the last one is speaking to your loved ones. Just staying connected with people is so important as well. It's a part of our evolutionary process. That's how we survived, and before, making sure we wouldn't get eaten by animals, but it's still a huge part of our biology. So just stay close to, or stay in touch to, your dear ones.
Do you know what? Those are fantastic reminders. Most of them are reminders. The cold shower I've heard before, and I've done it before as well. But so I guess I've done it for a little while, and not every day. But I went for a period where I did cold showers every day, and it's you know what, you're brave to keep doing it, but it does work. It does have a really big impact, and I think. Like everything, I guess these things are about moderation, aren't they? So it's not that you have to talk to your friends and family every day. If you feel like you need a bit of time to yourself, take that time to yourself. Not like you have to eat perfectly all the time. You know, if you want a biscuit, have a biscuit. But it's about moderation. It's not like you have to cold shower for 10 minutes and you have to do it every day. If you don't feel like it, don't do it. But it's using those practical insights and that advice to make smart decisions and keep yourself informed and keep yourself focused on your well-being throughout a difficult time, isn't it?
I think definitely it's one of those things that take it in moderation, see what works for you, and these are tips. If it doesn't work, then don't do it. All I'm asking you is to try.
Fantastic. And that's brilliant. And is there anything else that you'd like to add today, either because I haven't asked you about it or because you feel it's a really, really good contribution or insight to the conversation, and for our audience who are typically going to be your SDRs and BDRs and who are slogging their guts out in sales to try and hit targets? Is there anything else that you'd like to add that might help them when thinking about their well-being?
I think stay safe and use this time just to reflect, maybe reflect on your life. Maybe this is the first time you're actually stopping and thinking and looking around you, seeing what you want to accomplish, where you want to go. I think the time is definitely now. Make sure, don't stress, just try to relax as much as possible.
Fantastic. And if somebody wanted to get in touch with you, Sara, if they watched this and thought, do you know what, I need to have a conversation with Sara, what should they do? How can they get in touch with you?
So they can get in touch with me either on LinkedIn at just Sara Haadem. My last name is spelled Haadem. There are so many people that get it wrong, so making sure that I'm spelling it out loud, and it's Sara without an H. So LinkedIn is probably the easiest, or just emailing me at sarahaadem@gmail.com.
Fantastic. Well, Sarah, it's been a pleasure chatting to you. Some really good advice there, and also some great insight into what coaching looks like for those people that maybe haven't thought about that or haven't heard about it before. So it's been really, really valuable insight, and I've really enjoyed talking to you today. Thank you so much for contributing to the Wellity community. It's been great to have you.
Yeah, it's been great to be here. Thank you so much for your time.